Hello, it's Julia.
And Bobby.
And we're back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about diabetes in pets. So diabetes is actually one of the most common diseases in pets and humans. So in this little infographic, this was done 3 years ago, so it probably has gone up, unfortunately, but it says it is estimated that 1 in every 160 dogs in America will develop diabetes. So considering there's millions and millions of dogs in the US, well, in North America in general, that's a lot of pets.
You could debate the exact reasons why, but a lot of it is probably because certain brands of foods and treats and things like that use a lot of sugars to try and entice them.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over the symptoms of diabetes real quick so that you can kind of get an idea of what diabetes looks like in your pet. So one of the things that you would notice first is excessive drinking. So the animals that have diabetes drink a lot. And by a lot, I mean like, say our guys would drink, they'd go through like 8 liters a day or something like that?
Between all of them, like 20.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of water. But yeah, you would see like your dog drinking like an entire bowl in one sitting, like several times a day. And then partially because of this, they would also urinate a lot more. But even if they're not drinking more, like if you restricted it, they would still urinate a lot more. Another thing that you would find is weight loss. And I'll get into why later, but if you notice that all of a sudden your dog kind of drops in weight, then obviously there's probably something wrong, but diabetes might be the reason. And an increased appetite, so which is a little bit weird to pair with the weight loss. So if they're eating a lot more and just constantly hungry, but they keep losing weight, then that could be a sign that they have diabetes. So I'm going to go, there's 2 types of diabetes. I want to go over what the 2 different types are because the way that you kind of treat them is a little bit different depending on what it is. So type 1 is when they're basically born with it. So their pancreas can't produce insulin, and so that can either be that they're born with it, like I said, or that their pancreas has gone under some kind of trauma, such as like cancer or anything like stress even, or pancreatitis.
So if it shows up with pancreatitis, would it be temporary or permanent?
If it's with pancreatitis, if the pancreatitis has permanently damaged the pancreas, then it would be permanent. But if it's just like the pancreatitis is there and then it goes, then it'd be just kind of temporary.
So that's
another
something to be wary of if you go to the vet then with pancreatitis, that you should probably test for the diabetes again a second time just to be safe.
Another instance where it's actually temporary is gestational dogs. So if they are in heat or if they're pregnant, they can actually get diabetes from that, from the estrus.
That shouldn't shock anybody because, childbearing is
extremely stressful.
It's hard on the body.
So that's type 1. So that's the most common that you see in dogs, which is actually surprising since obesity is such a rampant problem. But type 2 is when the body becomes insulin resistant. So the pancreas is still producing insulin, which is what regulates your blood sugar. I should probably say that. But so yeah, the pancreas is still producing insulin, but the cells have become kind of numb to it and they don't respond anymore. So the sugar is kind of there in the blood and it's just not responding to the insulin that's there. This is usually because the animal is morbidly obese. It puts a lot of stress on the body, it affects the hormones and cells differently, and so yeah, it causes a lot of problems. Diabetes being one of them.
A lot of the time, general health is step number 1.
Mm-hmm. So what can diabetes do to the body? So it is, like I said, it's extremely common in pets and people, and I'm sure someone listening probably has diabetes. A lot of people in my family do.
Yeah,
So it can lead to a lot of problems like cataracts in the eyes. It can actually lead to swelling of the feet and hands because in the extremities because it builds up blood pressure. An enlarged liver, urinary tract infections because of bad like filtering of the kidneys, seizures if it gets really bad, and the kidney failure and ketoacidosis kind of go hand in hand. So the ketoacidosis is a condition where your body, like the pet's body, isn't producing enough of the insulin to get rid of the sugar in the blood, so they can't actually use the sugar that's there. And so it kind of goes around and actually can start shutting down organs because they can't use the form the sugar is in, which is really bad for the brain, and that's why they would get seizures because the brain actually runs on glucose. So if they can't break down those sugars into glucose, then your brain kind of starts shutting itself down. So if it can't use these sugars, then your body actually starts breaking down its own proteins. Preferably, it would use fats, but it doesn't always do that. So it could actually start breaking down their own muscle tissue, and then because they're using so much of the fat and muscle, it creates ketones, and the ketones go into the brain, and then it can actually affect the brain and the nervous system. So that's really bad.
Anything affecting the brain is pretty much a worst case scenario.
Yeah. All right, so there's different ways of managing diabetes if your pet has it. Obviously, giving insulin is one way, but that only works if they have type 1 diabetes. If they have type 2, the best way is actually managing their diet. So, if they have type 1, giving them insulin will pretty much regulate it, but you have to make sure you give the insulin with their food so they can use it when they're ingesting the starches. But if they have type 2 and they're like obese or they have, problems with their pancreas, then they basically just need to lose weight, have a healthy lifestyle, or a very low starch food. So we're going to show you some examples of low starch foods.
And with medications, you always want to try and let the general health do as much as you can and use the medication as sparingly as possible, because some of those medications are pretty harsh, and you don't want to overdose on insulin. So you want to really manage it and try and get it to the point where you can give as little as possible.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, you'll have to give it, but you want to give as little as you can.
So that's actually part of the reason why we made one of our products. It's called colloidal magnesium. And so it's just magnesium in water, but I'll show you a study. So this is a review study that they did, kind of looking at what magnesium does in the body. But magnesium actually helps regulate blood sugar and blood pressure. And so you can pair that with the insulin to kind of help reduce the amount that they need.
Regulate is one of my favorite words in the nutraceutical industry because it means that it doesn't just make it spike or drop. It actually helps your body determine the correct level.
Basically what the magnesium does, and specifically, is it helps your cells respond better to the insulin. So if it's there, then your cells can actually use it.
Which is also preferable to just loading it up. Rather than throwing more at it, you're making what is already there more accessible.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to the starches in foods, which is a big problem because if you have diabetes and you intake a lot of starch, then your glucose will spike in your blood, and that's what's going to cause the problems because your insulin can't keep up with it, or you don't have insulin at all.
Yeah, starch in food can be a little bit tricky because
they don't list it.
Starch and sugars aren't listed, and those are subcategories of carbs, which also aren't listed. So basically just have to take the protein, fat, ash, moisture, and carbs will add up to 100. I believe it was our actual cost of pet foods that we talked about that.
Yes.
So you can go back to that video to find it in more detail.
Yeah, there's actually a formula that we put up.
But yeah, so if you add all those up, you should get 100. So whatever you're missing is the carbs. So if you have a low fat, low protein food, it's going to be high carb. If it's high fat, high protein, it's going to be low carb.
Yeah, so this is Origin, just their original formula. So as you can see, their protein is 38, which is really high, and their fat content is 18, which is fairly high, and they have an ash of 9, a fiber of 5, which is pretty normal.
And a moisture of 12, which is a little bit above.
A little bit higher, which is a little bit weird.
You'll also notice going through the ingredient list, it's meats and meats and meats.
Yeah.
So meats aren't going to have starches and sugars.
Liver, meat,
so
meat.
And even when you do get to the starch components, they're not like sugary starches.
Yeah, so these types of starches, like the starch components, are actually pretty high in like proteins themselves and a little bit of fat. So if you compare that to, we went with natural balances, grain-free, potato, and duck. So the first ingredient is potato, which everybody should know that's super, super high in starch.
You'll also notice that the food says potato and duck. That means it's going to be primarily potato with some duck.
Yeah. So yeah, the protein is 22%, which is significantly lower than the Origin. The fat is also very low. It also has less fiber, which is a little bit surprising, and less moisture, which just adds to the starch component. So yeah, this food is extremely high in starch.
Yeah, so based on just a preliminary look, you're looking at 18% roughly more starch. The other thing that we should show is the feeding guides, because this is a percentage basis.
Yes.
You'll notice here, say a 50-pound dog, it says to feed an adult about 3.5 cups.
Yeah.
Whereas Origin, 3 cups.
3 cups, yeah.
Origin, I'm guessing, will be probably 2. They actually make you type it in.
Oh, that's rude.
So.
About 44 pounds.
Yeah.
Less active.
Yeah, so they're saying a cup and a third for a 44-pound. You can probably bump that up to 1.5, 1.75.
Yeah. Half as much.
Obviously, not only would the natural balance be significantly higher in a percentage basis, but you also are feeding roughly twice as much. Mm-hmm. So you're actually going to be getting somewhere around 3 times more sugars and starches than you would with the Origin.
Yeah, so you can use this trick, obviously, on other foods. So if you have a pet that has diabetes and you're looking for a food that's low in starch to kind of help manage that, just look at the bag, look at the protein levels, look at the fat, kind of do the math on the feeding guide. Yeah.
And even within, like, let's say both foods had 20% calories, or not calories, carbs. Just look at the ingredients. If you see corn, which is high sugar, and the other ones say barley, which is low sugar, then obviously you can kind of just extrapolate those and say, well, I know a whole grain is a better option than a sugary grain.
So ingredients that you kind of want to avoid for pets with diabetes are, like we said, corn, white potato, even sweet potato sometimes. White rice is pretty bad too.
Beet pulp, although a lot of the time the beet pulp, they'll take the sugar out.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll specify in the ingredient list, like sugar removed.
Yeah.
Then it's just kind of a fiber source, but if not, then it has a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah, so, and a lot of people ask me, what about fruits? The sugars in fruits, I give a pass to personally. Because
they still contribute, but they're not as bad.
Yeah, they contribute, but they're much more easily absorbed. They're typically not in excessive quantities. Like, for example, let's say there's apple in a food. It's not going to be the, 60% like a corn might be. it's going to be more like 2-3%. It's going to be a very low number. So it's going to have some sugar, but you're not going to get that really high levels or anything like that from it.
Mm-hmm. As far as treats go, I would recommend getting meat.
Yeah.
That would be no starch and mostly protein and a little bit of fat.
Yeah, so typically I would recommend dehydrated or freeze-dried meat. Um, Usually I look for like incredibly simple ingredient labels.
Yeah.
So if it just says chicken breast, great.
One other thing that I didn't really mention is for managing their diabetes is giving them a lot of fiber. So if you can find a food that's high fiber or even give them a fiber supplement, that actually really helps. Giving it with their food because fiber slows down their digestion and that can help decrease the amount that their glucose spikes if they can kind of not digest it as fast.
Mm-hmm. So typically you're going to want to look at weight control foods for that.
Mm-hmm. Which a lot of the time they'll be obese anyways, so
yeah.
It helps.
And we'll talk about it more when we talk about weight loss, but when you're looking for a weight control food, do not buy one that advertises it's low calories. You actually want a very calorie dense food. That means that you can feed less.
Yeah.
So don't get trapped in that little trick.